Good evening. Hello. Can you hear me? Great. So, good evening, everyone. Hello. Yes, I'm Bernard Cherkasov. I am CEO of the museum. I get to do my favorite parts today, which is to welcome all of you to our program and to thank the people who have made this possible. So on behalf of our board of trustees and board of directors, many of whom are here today, on behalf of our staff and volunteers, I am honored to welcome you to this milestone occasion. Special welcome to Consul General Serhiy Koledov of Ukraine and Consul Yevgeny Drobot from the Consulate General of Ukraine and Honorary Consul Oscar Tatosian of the Republic of Armenia. Yes. This museum opened to the public just 15 years ago, actually 15 years just a few weeks ago, fulfilling the dreams and commitment of Holocaust survivors, honoring their stories and sharing their resilience and lessons with the world. In these 15 years, we have reached millions of visitors, dignitaries from many nations, and have traveled, and actually an entire generation of school kids. Our original content has traveled from Navy Pier in Chicago to United Nations headquarters in New York City. It has gone from South by Southwest to the Venice Film Festival. But our hardworking team does not like to rest on its laurels. So with this opening of the Spagat Family Voices of Genocide exhibition, we are growing closer to fulfilling our founder's mission of remembering the past and transforming the future. Dr. James Waller, Holocaust and genocide historian, and one of the dedicated scholar advisors for this exhibition, once wrote, "Prevention of genocide begins with an understanding of how it happens and why. Only then, once we have traced the etiology of the disease, can we begin to find ways to prevent it from ever taking place again." And that is the reason why our team went to work now 4 years ago to begin the process of creating this exhibition. Elie Wiesel reminded us that whoever witnessed to a witness becomes a witness. And what this first of its kind experience now means that visitors can learn firsthand the roots and impact of genocide directly from the survivors who witnessed and lived through the unimaginable. And we hope that you tonight and another generation of visitors who walk through this museum can make a commitment to become a witness to their communities and their world. So this expansion is a labor of love of many passionate individuals. it truly takes a village. So bear with me while I recognize some of the individuals who've made this possible. I want to start with my own colleagues, Ariel Weiniger, John Tweedy, Leah Rauch, Jessica Halton, and our project's director, Kelley Szany. Thanks to their... It is thanks to their tireless efforts and hours of research, writing, editing, as well as their dedication to collaborating with communities impacted by genocide, that we're able to share these survivors' stories in their own voices within our walls. I am continuously in awe of the strength and resilience of our witnesses, Mark and Irma and Seneda and Kizito and Amina. Thank you for the gift of sharing your stories. We are grateful for the wisdom and guidance of our all-star scholar advisors, Dr. Holly Naiseth, Nitsita Tira, Ambassador David Schaefer, Dr. Scott Strauss, and Dr. James Waller, each pushing us to examine our framing, focus our story, and create a meaningful learning experience. And we were lucky to work with our creative exhibitions, fabrications, and media teams, Lucy Creative. There are many of you who are here today who brought this vision to life. Ravenswood Studio, who guided the fabrication and installation, the team at Blue Cadet, and David and Kathy Monk of Brave New Pictures, who filmed hours of testimony of our witnesses and brought their words to life. And photographer Kathleen Hinkle, whose vision behind the lens captured the courage, grace, and resolve of our 5 witnesses. And finally, today would not be possible without the generosity of our presenting sponsor, the Spagat family, and the additional support of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Harvey L. Miller Supporting Foundation, and a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. So thank you to all. And we do have a special message from our Governor Pritzker by video today.
Hello, this is Governor J.B. Pritzker. I first want to take a moment to recognize some of the remarkable and inspiring survivors and descendants in the audience today, especially Mark, Irma, Seneda, Kizito, and Amina. Thank you for sharing your stories of courage, strength, survival, and resilience. The late Nobel laureate and Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel once said, "A memorial unresponsive to the future would also violate the memory of the past." It is these words that catalyze the work of Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center in the creation of the Spagat Family Voices of Genocide exhibition. Although the world has changed dramatically since the Holocaust, tragically, the human capacity for inhumanity has not. We need only look at the continuation of genocide, past and present, that still threatens the security, well-being, and lives of people across the globe. That's why this museum was founded, to remember the past so we can transform the future. Over the past decade and a half, the museum has committed itself through cross-cultural special exhibitions, trainings, and public programs to elevate the stories and histories of Holocaust survivors and survivors of genocides across the world and throughout time. The Spagat Family Voices of Genocide exhibition is a natural step for an institution that continues to revolutionize the field of Holocaust and genocide memory and education, and a testament to the forward thinking of the survivors who founded the museum, who believed that part of its mission was to step beyond one tragic era to ensure that visitors knew that the promise of never again has yet to be fulfilled. As governor, I'm honored that Illinois will be the home to this first of its kind exhibition, providing critical content to share survivor stories and teach the conditions that contribute to the perpetration of genocide. The exhibition will broaden horizons to focus on not just ending the violence, but also on reconciliation and healing, By doing so, the museum will expand awareness, foster compassion and empathy, and empower people to consider what actions they can take to prevent and respond to genocide. Thank you to the Spagat family and to all who have made this exhibition possible.
And it is now my pleasure to turn the program over to Kelley Szany for a conversation with our witnesses and survivors. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So it's a pleasure this evening to be with Mark Akgulian, who is here, a grandson of 4 Armenian genocide survivors, Irma Alicia Velásquez Nimatuj, a Maya Kich'e survivor of the genocide in Guatemala, Kizito Kalima, a Tutsi survivor of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda, and Amina, a Rohingya survivor of the ongoing genocide in Burma, who is accompanied by her son, Nazir, who will serve as her translator this evening. As we jump into the first questions of tonight, and really kind of before I throw out the questions to our panelists, I want to share brief overviews of each genocide so that we can kind of have a grounding and context as I ask each of the witnesses here a question. Additionally, for those of you that made your way upstairs to the second floor to see the Spagat Family Voices of Genocide exhibition, it is divided into 7 zones. And really the heart of the exhibition is 3 zones that are the roots of genocide, warning signs and response, and repair and rebuild. And it's really these areas that we're going to focus our conversation around today. So let's dive in right away and talk about Zone 4, which is roots of genocide. In the final years of the Ottoman Empire, it was catastrophic for its Christian minorities. Led by Turkish Ottoman leaders, an estimated 2 million Armenians, Greeks, and Assyrians were murdered. Hundreds of thousands were deported, abducted, and displaced in a deliberate and systematic campaign of religious, cultural, and ethnic destruction. So, Mark, in the exhibition, you talk about the early years prior to the genocide, what life was like for your grandparents before the time, and really well before the violence began, how some of them knew that they had to leave, that they had to get out. So can you talk a little bit about those precursors leading up to the genocide in Armenia?
Yeah, I mean, the Armenians within the Ottoman Empire were a minority. They had, when the Ottoman Empire was expanding, everything was great. They were the merchant class. Things were good for them. When nationalism started eating away at the Ottoman Empire, it put pressures on the Christian community within the within the empire. They were Christians were always viewed as second-class citizens by their Muslim neighbors. They had there were restrictions on activities that they could perform. There was taxes that were oppressive, and there was arbitrary taking of property by their Muslim neighbors. These things got exacerbated as the Ottoman Empire imploded. There in the late when my grandparents were born, my 2 grandfathers were born in the 1890s. At a time that or 1880s and 1890s. At that time, the Armenians, like most people of that period, had started discovering that they wanted their own, they wanted their rights. They wanted to be equal citizens in a constitutional kind of government, and they were advocating for that. That was looked on as treachery by Sultan Abdul Hamid, who was the Sultan at that time. and there were pogroms against the Armenians that this is like in the late 1890s that killed an estimated 100 to 300,000 Armenians. So this was a precursor of the genocide. It was a sign that things are there's a problem there. There was the Young Turks came on in 1908 and supplanted the Sultan, and things looked better. The Armenians were supportive of the Young Turks. They advocated constitutional reforms, so things were looking better at a certain point. But as it became clear that the Armenians and other Christians within the empire presented a problem for the nationalistic bent of the Young Turks, there was a need for a solution of sorts to rid the empire of the Christian minorities within it, so that a monolithic, uniform state could be put into place, and the Armenians were in the way. When it actually took place, I mean, like when it came to a head was a day that we celebrate as Armenians, April 24th, 1915, when 250 Armenian leaders, poets, clergymen, wealthy businessmen, politicians were all gathered in Istanbul, 250 of them arrested, and most of them hung outright in Istanbul, and the rest imprisoned and later executed. And this was the beginning of the genocide. So the writing was on the wall for a while, but that's when it actually got the period on it.
Ready. Okay. And we'll get into ultimately what happened to your grandparents as that proceeds along. So Irma, for you, this is really the Guatemalan genocide. I had a few people asking me, right, during the reception, when was that? And what we know is that this was during a really bloody 36-year long civil war where an estimated 200,000 civilians were killed, largely indigenous Maya, as part of a government-led terror campaign aimed to destroy an ethnic group that they suspected or continued to label as anti-government rebels. From 1980 to 1983, the army, supplemented by private death squads, systematically razed villages and abducted civilians from their homes and off streets. They became known as the disappeared. And Irma, you talk a lot about in your testimony and some of the quotes that we pulled in the Roots of Genocide section. You talk not only about the centuries of persecution against the indigenous populations of Guatemala and the Americas as a whole, but you also talk about, it's interesting, you and Kizito and Amina kind of all had similar conditions to talk about, factors to talk about. You all mentioned school and how your own personal experience of persecution starting for you at school by your classmates, by your teachers, and beginning to see a violence become institutionalized in Guatemala. Can you talk about those kind of early moments for you as a young child?
Sure. First of all, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to the museum. Thank you to all the people who work for this incredible exhibition. When I remember my childhood, I remember how difficult was to live in a country like Guatemala. The racism and the discrimination and exclusion start for us when we close the door of our house. In the public spaces, in education, in health, the racism was so difficult and was in every moment, and it was part of the institution. So in my experience, I went to private school because my parents need that. As a daughter, we can speak Spanish very well, because without Spanish, you cannot survive in Guatemala. And my parents spoke a little, very bad Spanish, and my grandparents never spoke Spanish, only our language, the Kich'e language. So during my childhood, the aggressions were terrible. In few words, I never exist for the rest of the children. I never exist for the for the teachers. They never saw me. They never hear me. Also, in the school, I learned that the responsibles of the problems in Guatemala were the indigenous people. We are the majority in this moment. In the 70s, in the 90s, we were the majority of the population. But in the classes, I learned that the indigenous people are lazy people, drunkards, ugly people, and many others ideas about us. So for me, the school was one war, and my family was another war. When I live inside my family, sometimes it was very difficult for me to understood that what I learned in the school is not what we live in the everyday life, because my family starts working from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday to Sunday. So for me, those wars were very hard. I never had a friends when I was in the elementary school. Until now, I don't have any friend from those times. And when I went to university, it was almost more wars, because it was in the middle of the civil war. I never used my clothes, never. I never used my second last name. My second last name is Nimatuj, Nimtuj. This is two words in Kich'e. Nim is big and Tuj is hot water. So if other indigenous hear my last name, they know where I come from. So when I went to university, I never chose my clothes, because the police, the army, was against every indigenous people. We have the label as an enemy of the state. So every indigenous was an enemy of the state, Guatemala. So I changed my clothes. I never used my second last name. I tried to speak with my better Spanish as possible. And when the army asked me about my ID, I tried to speak very clear, and I was another person. I was totally another girl in order to survive. I never told to anybody in the bus or in the street that I was a university student. I was a woman, I was indigenous, and I was a student in the university. All these reasons were, if the police know about this, they will kill me. But in many moments, I saw how the army took a lot of youth people from the buses because they don't speak Spanish, and they identify they as indigenous. And I saw this, I survived, but they don't survive because they were indigenous. So to speak Spanish very well, to went to private school, saved my life. but not the life of the rest of the people, of indigenous people. So I had the right to use my clothes in 2005 when I returned to my country. And in 2002, when I went to my country for my field work, after a very long day of work, we went to a bar for a drink, a beer, with some other colleagues. And the police in the bar in Guatemala told me, you don't have the right to enter here because you are an Indian woman. And in this place, we don't accept Indian people. It was in 2002. Mm-hmm. So it has been a very long way in order to change this. In 2002, after this act of violence against not only me, against all the indigenous people in my country, all indigenous women in my country, I remember my mother, my grandmother, my sister, all the indigenous people suffer all this structural racism. So we work together and we pass a law against racism in Guatemala. This law is not perfect, it's very general, but it's a step. So we have a lot of challenges now, but finally I understand that everything is little by little.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about some of the incredible work. As those of you who know, right, we have this word upstander, and Irma is the most amazing upstander and activist in her country. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later. So Kizito, I saw a couple times with what Irma was saying, your eyes perked up like, oh, that's interesting, making connections with some of the things that she had to say. So as I mentioned, Kizito is a Tutsi survivor of the 94 genocide in Rwanda. This was when a Hutu-led government orchestrated what became known as the systematic destruction of the Tutsi population in Rwanda, Hutu political opponents, and those Hutus who chose to protect the Tutsis. Starting in the capital city of Kigali, where you were, the violence spread throughout the country with shocking speed and brutality, as ordinary citizens were incited by local officials and the Hutu power government to take up arms against their neighbors. Within 3 months, 100 days, an estimated 1 million Tutsi and Hutu moderates had been murdered. So Kizito, you the parts that you were perking up with Irma is you talked a lot about in your testimony in the Roots of Genocide section being at school as a young child and being constantly reminded this is a Tutsi, this is a Hutu, your classmates that you played sports with, going to training and talking about how they were going to training to kill you Tutsi, the cockroaches. Can you talk about those early years for you as a young person in Rwanda, as a Tutsi, before that April day in 1994?
Thank you so much. Yes, it's very tough to talk about lives when she was speaking. It just brings back the memories. And thank you so much for giving us these opportunities and having our testimony here. So when I was young, I grew up in a country I'll call it was a apartheid state. We have our own national ID with our tribally, our ethnic group name. So there's no way in the world you can hide. And there was a checkpoint every, I would say, 10 miles. There's one in front of my house. We used to live on top of the hill, and if you come up, driveway, you just landed in a. So the checkpoint was in front of my house. So anytime I leave my house, I have to show my ID. And my ID, the Tutsi tribe or Tutsi ethnic group, was highlighted with a yellow marker. Even if it's in the darkness, they'll find what it is. And of course, we go by the physical appearance. I've been so tall. My dad was 7'1", and I've been always tall. So if you're a Tutsi, you are tall and slender. If you saw my picture there, I was like a 13, 14 years old. I was 6'2". So we were all, there's no way I could hide. So, but politically, the young people were being prepared for the genocide. We didn't know. So anytime in the classroom, you get up in the morning, you go to classroom, and we sing the national anthem. I went to Catholic school. We recite our rosary, and now they start calling us out. They say, "How many Tutsis are here? Raise your hands." And you get up. So most of the time, I was the only one in a classroom of 45 kids, and of course, it was just to remind me that I'm nothing among this group. And the way everything she mentioned about being lazy or being ugly, whatever it was. Can you imagine that they used to tell me that I'm not good in sport? I don't dunk on them. I'm like, okay, what are you talking about? I'm dunking on you. What are you talking about? So, but it was the things. Anytime I do something in athletic, I play every sports, soccer, volleyball, basketball, whatever you name it. They will just come up with something, you know. So, but it was so terrible to the point where that I always talk about the two curfews. I had my mom's curfew and the government curfew. So I could handle my mom's curfew, but the government curfew was too much for me. Because I could not go to, let me say, to another city without what they call a laissez-passer. It's like a travel document. Imagine being a teenager, a kid actually, 9, 10 years old, and you know how to go to the city county building, our mayor's office. By the time you're 6, 7, you know how to apply for the travel document. It was something. I have a 10-year-old daughter. She came in by a candle, and I'm like, how did I do it? So when she was talking, it was just bringing back the memories because it was horrible. It was a horrible situation. We live in a dormitory, in a boarding school. Anytime I get up, I come back to sleep at night. Sometimes my mattress is gone, or there's water on my mattress, or there's a note say you cockroaches, your days are numbered. And this is my friend, so-called my friends. So but those type of I would say for threat, or some challenges I faced when I was young, it manifested in 1994 because everything just unfolded. Whatever was happening, it's like I was prepared for. But it was just tough. It was rough, and for a young kid, I know, some of you come from the Holocaust survivor family. I work with a lot of Holocaust survivors, their sons and daughters, and now a friend of mine, and they always talked about when they see me acting out, they're like, "Oh man, who does that?" I'm like, "Yo, we crazy. Just give us a chance." We have some issues because we suffer from PTSD. That's something everybody who survived a genocide, the Holocaust, and atrocities, you cannot avoid it because it's something just you always sit down and think like, why did I go through this? Why me? But at the end of the day, you realize that maybe there's a reason why you survived. To me, I feel like I survived for this. I want to share my story and teach people and encourage people, and hopefully we can prevent the future massacres.
And Amina, for you, so as I talked about at the beginning, we're still seeing the ongoing genocide raging in Burma, and it really has been for decades. The Burmese government has persecuted the Rohingya Muslim minority in Burma, particularly in the Rakhine state. The Rohingya have been denied citizenship, subjected to mass violence, confined in concentration camps, and cut off from access to adequate food, healthcare, education, and livelihood. Since the renewed violence in 2017, over 1 million Rohingya have fled Burma to overcrowded refugee camps, one of the largest refugee crises in the world. Amina, for you, you spoke about in your testimony how before the genocide began, how peacefully you lived together, but that the military began spreading lies between the groups and inside the communities to start the fights, and that they began burning mosques and killing the imam. Can you talk about those early days before really this larger mass violence began?
Tu meu piona belores mo e noa do Burma ပြည်မှာအကုန်လုံးအေးဆေးနေလို့ရတယ်အခုဒီမှာစစ်သားတွေဝင်လာပြီးတော့ပြဿနာရှာတယ်ဘယ်လိုလဲဆိုတော့ကလာတွေနဲ့ကလေးတွေနဲ့ရန်ရှာပေးတယ်ဆိုတော့ဗလီတွေကိုရှိုးနေတယ်အီမမ်တွေကိုတတ်နေတယ်အဲ့ဒါကိုနည်းနည်းတို့တင်ပြတယ်
မင်္ဂလာပါအားလုံးကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်လာတဲ့လူကြားရောက်လာတဲ့လူတွေအားလုံးကိုလည်းကျေးဇူးတင်ကြောင်းပြောလိုပါတယ်ပြောပြ
Good evening thank you so much for having her here and she's very welcome with like from like being welcomed by this is very honorable
ဒီစစ်သားတွေလောက်တဲ့ဆိုတော့လေအမေကအတိအကျတော့မသိဘူးเนาะဒါပေမဲ့အမေတို့ငယ်စဉ်ဘဝကလေးကနေပြီးတော့10နှစ်17နှစ်အရွယ်ကလေးကနေရက်ကွက်ထဲမှာဒီလိုမျိုးခဏခဏဖြစ်လေဖြစ်စားရှိတယ်
So back in early days, like when she was a young kid, she could go to school and go to playground and all that, like be like her childhood kid, who she want to be. But then this like army and militaries came in and started like putting lies towards the public.
မေရေခင်88ရေခင်နောက်ပိုင်းမှာကလေးကဒီအခုလိုပြဿနာမျိုးမျိုးဖြစ်တဲ့ကိစ္စတွေကိုအမေနားလဲတာပေါ့
Since 1988, there have been spreading lies. The militaries are spreading lies.
ဒီအချိန်အမေတက်က16 19အတွင်းဒီလောက်မှရှိတယ်
She was a teenage girl, like she was 16, 17.
အဲ့ဒီကဘယ်ကနေစပြီးဒီရေခင်မှာပြဿနာတက်လဲတော့မသိဘူးဒါပေမဲ့အိမ်ကနေပြီးတော့အမေရဲ့မောင်တယောက်အမေရဲ့အကိုတယောက်ကိုသူတို့ဆွဲသွားပြီးတော့အိမ်ကနေလာပြီးတော့ခေါ်သွားလိုက်တာသိတယ်
So the first thing that she remembered when she was a 16, 17-year-old, that her uncle was dragged out from their own house by a military to be killed because he was being an imam.
တယောက်ကအသက်40လောက်ရှိမယ်တယောက်ကအသက်65နှစ်လောက်ရှိမယ်
One of them is 45-year-old and the other uncle is 60-year-old.
အဲ့ဒီနောက်ပိုင်းမှာတွေကအမေတို့အသက်ကြီးလာပြီနောက်ပိုင်းမှာတွေအခုဒီလိုမျိုးခဏခဏဖြစ်လာတာတွေတွေ့တယ်ပေါ့ပလီတွေဖြိုးတာတွေကြောင်သားတွေကိုခေါ်သွားပြီးတတ်တာတွေအဲ့ဒါတွေမြင်ခဲ့ရတယ်ပေါ့
Since then, she have been seeing that the mosques are being burned down, imam are being killed. They have like no rights of citizenship, no more school for them. It's just ongoing problems.
နောက်အမေတို့နားလေတိတတ်တဲ့ရွယ်မှာမှတ်ပုံတွေလုပ်ဖို့တွားရင်လည်းသူတို့မှတ်ပုံတွေလုပ်မပေးဘူး
They don't give them their own document where they were born in their own country.
နေတော့အဖေတွေအမေတွေကဘယ်ရလဲအဲ့လိုမေးတယ်
They ask questions again, where's your parent from?
အဲ့တော့ငါတို့ဘိုးစဉ်ပေါင်းစကလည်းအဲ့ဒီနိုင်ငံပဲ
The whole generation, their family's generation are from Burma.
နာနာတွေနနီးတွေအတော်တွေဦးလေးတွေအဖေတွေအမေတွေလည်းအကုန်လုံးအဲ့နိုင်ငံသားပဲ
Great grandparents are from Burma too.
အဲ့တော့သူတို့တွေအဲ့လိုမေးတဲ့အခါကျရွှေနေငါတို့လည်းဖြေတယ်ဒီနိုင်ငံသားဆိုပြီးတော့ပြောလို့ရှိရင်သူတို့ကပြောတာငါတို့နိုင်ငံမှာကလားဆိုတာမရှိဘူးအဲ့လိုပဲပြောတာ
When they ask where you from, the answer that they give is I'm from Burma. And they said we don't have Rohingya in Burma.
အဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီအချိန်က88အရင်ကသုံးကောက်ချိုမှတ်ပုံနေပေးတယ်
Before 1988, they have all the citizenship, they have all the rights, what they want to do. But since then, they don't have any other documentation.
အဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာကလားကလဲဗမာကိုလုံးကဒီသုံးကောက်ချိုလိုမျိုးပဲကိုင်းတာ
Before 1988, everyone have the same rights. Doesn't matter if you're Burmese Indians, doesn't matter if you're Rohingya, doesn't matter if you're Burmese from there. Everyone have the same rights, the same documentation.
အဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာတော့ပြည်သူလူထုတွေမှာခွဲခြားမှုပါတစ်ခုမှမရှိခဲ့ဘူး
Since then, they have been seeing all the racisms and killed are being tortured. Doesn't matter if you're a baby, doesn't matter if you're a teenager.
အဲ့လိုမှတ်ပုံနေပါတွေအတွက်မွေးစင်းနေပါတွေအတွက်သွားတဲ့အချိန်မှာပဲအဲ့ဒီမှာပဲပြောတာပဲခွဲခြားမှုအဲ့နေရာမှာပဲသိရတာကျန်တဲ့နေရာမှာမသိရဘူး
That's when she started realizing this is not fair to Rohingya culture. Is because they're being separated from everyone else.
နောက်လူပဲရက်ကွက်ထဲမှာလူတွေဝင်လာတယ်နေလေပဲကြာမျက်နှာစိမ်းတဲ့လူတွေဝင်လာတယ်ဝင်လာတဲ့ခါကျရင်သူတို့လမ်းလျှောက်သွားနေနေခေါင်းမိုးမှာဘာလည်းမသိပစ်တင်လိုက်တဲ့အိမ်ကမီးတွေထားလောင်းတာ
and then they see new peoples in their own neighborhood walking in, and they don't know what they be throwing on top of their roof, and then a couple minutes later that the house is burning down.
အဲ့လိုမီးလောင်တဲ့ခါကျရင်တရွာလုံးပြာချသွားတဲ့ခါကျတော့လူတွေစားဖို့နေခလေးတွေကြောင်းသွားဖို့အကုန်လုံးအခက်ဆက်ဆက်ရအခက်ခဲကြုံတယ်ပေါ့
After that, a couple minutes burning down, and then you see the next block, the mosque is being burning down, and then the school are being burning down, and then the kids are being killed.
အဲ့ချိန်ကျလို့ရှိရင်အစိုးရဝန်ထမ်းတွေလို့ရဲတွေစစ်သားတွေရောက်လာပြီလို့ရှိရင်သူတို့ကနေတို့အိမ်ကမီးဆလောင်နေတို့ဘယ်မှမထွက်နဲ့ဆိုပြီးတော့ခြံစည်းကိုခတ်ပြီးတော့လူတွေအားလုံးကိုအဲ့ဒီမှာပဲသူတို့ထားလိုက်တယ်ဈေးတွေပါထွက်ပြီးတော့ဝယ်စားဖို့မပေးတော့
When the fire people come, like firefighter, the police, when they come, they say, "Don't leave, stay in your house," and then they just don't let you run away from the fires. They killed you over there.
အဲ့တော့ထောက်ထားစားပဲစားတာနေမီးလောင်သွားပြီဆိုရင်သူတို့ရှိမှအထောက်ထားတောင်းတဲ့ခါကျရင်လည်းသူတို့ကနေတို့ဘင်္ဂလားတွေတို့ပေးလို့မရအောင်ဆိုပြီးတော့သူတို့ကထောက်ထားထုတ်မပေးတော့
And when you go back to the office to ask for your documentation, because your documentation was being burned down, and they said you're not Burmese, like you're Bengali, like which is from Bangladesh.
ဘင်္ဂလားဒေ့ရှ်ပြောတယ်အဲ့လိုဆိုရင်သူတို့မထုတ်ပြီးတော့မွေးထောက်နောက်တစ်ကောင်မင်းကထုတ်မပေးတော့ဘူး
And that's how everything started. Yeah.
အဲ့တော့နောက်ကလေးတွေတက်လာတဲ့ခါကျအဲ့ဒီကလေးတွေကိုကြောင်းထားဖို့ပါဘူးအဆက်အခက်ခဲတွေကြုံရတယ်ပေါ့
And then since then, that's when most of the Rohingya people have no more education since 1988.
အဲ့တော့ကလေးတွေကြောင်းသွားတဲ့အခါကျလို့ရှိရင်ကြောင်းမှလည်းဒီပုံစံမျိုးပဲဟိုပညာတက်လာတဲ့ဟိုမွတ်စလင်ကလေးတွေဆိုလို့ရှိရင်သူတို့ကအနောက်ချပစ်လိုက်တဲ့တခုခုဘာနာပြပြီးထုတ်လိုက်တယ်
And then if especially if you're a Muslim student, and they see that you're succeeding in school, they will find a way to drop you out or to expel you from school.
ကျောင်းမှလည်းလိုပဲဟိုလဲနောက်ဆုံးခွဲခြားမှုတွေဖြစ်လာကြတယ်ပေါ့ကျောင်းမှာကလေးတွေလေ
And since then, everyone for Rohingya, they have no education.
စေုံသွားလို့မရဘူးကျောင်းတက်လို့မရဘူးနိုင်ငံခြားပဲမဆိုပေါ့အခုဒီကနေပြီးတော့ငါတို့ဒီချစ်ကကိုကနေပြီးတော့တခြား state ကိုသွားကျင်တယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒီမှာလောလောကူသွားလို့ရတယ်ဗမာပြည်မှာသွားလို့မရဘူး
It's easier for us here if we want to travel through the states without any documentation. Back home, it's hard because you don't have any documentation. You don't have anything to travel from this city to other city.
ငါအမေကနေမကောင်းဖြစ်ခဲ့တယ်လို့သူအိမ်မှာငါအိမ်အောင်ကြပြီးတော့အမေကိုတကြည့်ဖို့သွားတာသူတို့ travel document ပေးလို့မပေးလို့ငါအမေကိုငါတော့မကြည့်ခဲ့ရဘူး
Once her mom was sick back home and she couldn't even go see her own mom in the hospital.
အဲ့လိုမျိုးတွေကြုံခဲ့ရတယ်ပေါ့
And that's the story. That's how everything started. Yeah, we come later.
စီးပွားရေးလည်းဘာမှမဆိုတခုခုလုပ်ချင်တယ်ဆိုရင်အခုဒီမှာဆိုင်တွေဖွင့်လို့ရှိရင် license တွေပါတွတ်သွားတယ်ခုမှဆိုရင်ဗမာပြည်မှာဆိုရင်မွတ်စလမန်နဲ့ပတ်သက်ပြီးတော့ဘာအလုပ်ငန်းမှသူတို့လုပ်ဖို့မပေးဘူးလမ်းဘေးမှာဈေးထိုင်အောင်ရင်ထမင်းကတော့လမ်းဘေးမှာဈေးထိုင်အောင်လည်းသူတို့ပေးမပေးအဲ့ဒီမှာလက်ဖမ်းသွားတယ်လို့ဈေးဘန်းတွေကန်ချပြီးတော့ထောင်းနေထည့်လိုက်တယ်လို့
And if they can't have any business, they don't have any food, they want their family to survive, and they just like sell fruits and everything on the side of the street. The police come, kick the whole like cart, and they take them to jail.
So let's maybe talk about then that movement into that imminent violence. So in zone 5 of the exhibition, we talk about those warning signs in response. What are those conditions and those actions that are going to be kind of that spark that ignites the flame, that widens the gulf of separation between sometimes what we call the in and out group. And Mark, for your family, you believe kind of began with your great uncle who was a mystic at the time. But talk to us about your family's experience, your grandparents, and how they were able to ultimately survive the genocide.
Sure. I grew up. I only knew one of my grandparents. I knew my grandmother. But I grew up in a community of survivors. There was a whole generation of the patriarchs and matriarchs in the Armenian community that I grew up, 250 families, who all shared similar experiences. My grandmother never talked about her experiences directly to me. We had to find out these things piecemeal by little whisperings of, between my parents' generation about what had happened to these people. I know my grandfather's and my grandmother's stories primarily because my mother had the sense to write down a lot of this and document their stories from interviews that she had with them. Both my grandfathers had, as I mentioned before, there were problems that were apparent within the communities that they were living. They sought safety for their families by economic safety for their families, and maybe a way of getting their families out of the situation in the old country by coming to America, to the Midwest, to Racine, Wisconsin, to work in factories. Both my grandfathers came in around 1912, thereabouts, and were working with a group of men from their villages, like Landsmannschaft, for Jews. There was a similar thing with Armenians. Everybody from one village poured into one community, and they worked and sent back money to their families with the intention of going back. But they happened to be where they were when the genocide began. You have to remember World War I was going on. There was no opportunity for them to go back to rescue their families. They were watching at a distance as this violence unfolded in the old country. Both my grandfathers had families back in their villages. They both happen to have two children, and a wife and two children. My grandfather my grandfather Avak on my father's side, he lost both his wife and his children. It's unclear what happened to them, but they perished. My grandfather on my mother's side had his wife was killed, and his two children were abducted by Turkish neighbors or people nearby, and never heard from again. My grandmothers both they were young women in villages in Turkey. My one grandmother on my father's side, she was 14 when the genocide began, 14, 15. Her brother, who was reputed to be a mystic of sorts and had predicted the Armenian genocide, that's what was said. He was burnt publicly, and the family witnessed this, from what I understand. Her brother and sister escaped to Syria, where they found safety behind the French lines there, and they were there for the duration of the war. But my grandmother was placed in a household. It's not clear the circumstance of that, but she was placed in a household of a Turkish neighbor. As I remember my grandmother, she had tattoos that were right under her collarbone that signified that she was the property of this family. So it was probably not a beneficial relationship for her, but she was in a safe place during the bulk of the genocide when it occurred. There's rumors that she had a child while she was in servitude there. That's really unclear. It's in the murk of history. In any case, but her siblings came back after the war and forcibly extracted her from her situation. She didn't want to leave. She was either afraid of leaving the situation in the house. She became attached maybe to the family. It's unclear, but she had to be forcibly taken out of the situation. She came to America along with her siblings in an arranged marriage. She married my grandfather, who had lost again his family. Who he was 15 years her senior. So she married this man sight unseen. And a year later, my father was born. And I should also mention she took on the name of my grandfather's wife, who had been murdered. So my other grandmother, who is probably more typical of the stories that I heard from people within our church. And it's typical of many of the survivors of the genocide. She was in a village in central Turkey, central Anatolia, and she had 6 brothers, husband, a baby infant. I believe it was a boy. The 7, her husband and the 6 brothers were all drafted into the army. I'm saying that in quotation marks. They were taken into the army, never heard from again. It was a typical way that the men were extracted from the villages so that it would allow the women to be vulnerable. My grandmother, along with her infant child, her sister, and her mother, were entered into these death marches that were by foot. That they went hundreds of miles from central Turkey to the Syrian desert. That's all on foot. They were prey to irregular Turkish army troops who were often convicts that had been released for that sole purpose of harassing the Armenians as they were on the road. They were also subject to Kurdish tribesmen who came and harassed their ranks and stole many of the children and women. My grandmother, her sister was taken by a Turk, and she was never heard from again. My grandmother, her child perished by starvation. I'm sorry, this is getting emotional about this, but she perished through starvation. My grandmother buried her in her apron at the side of the road. And my grandmother's mother, she left because she was too weak to go on, and she just remembers seeing her sitting under a tree as her last memory. My grandmother made it all the way to Syria. She found a sanctuary with an Arab family who she worked for as a housemaid. She found her way to Istanbul after the war, and lived on the streets there, working as a maid whenever she could. Met my grandfather's family members who were residing in Istanbul, who arranged a marriage for her to my grandfather, who was in Racine. So she comes over, sees the Statue of Liberty, ends up in Racine, Wisconsin after this ordeal, and marries this man, again, sight unseen, who's much older than her. And within a year, she has my mother. And you think about, I think often about this whole group of people that I grew up with, who, sadness was pervasive in this community. It was something that was tangible, and I think of what you were saying about just like PTSD. These people had really suffered, and the tragedy of their experience was really apparent all through my childhood.
Thank you for sharing your family story. Irma, can you talk a little bit more? You have this really powerful quote in the exhibition in which you say, "During my childhood, I was aware of discrimination. I felt it on my skin." Can you talk a little bit more about your experience during this time, your family? I know currently there is one of the Army generals you mentioned in the testimony in the exhibition about the building the dam at Rio Negro and how they annihilated the entire community there. The general responsible for the atrocities that took place there, I understand, is now on trial in Guatemala. Can you talk a little bit more about that time period for yourself? And it's interesting, I will say, you all mentioned in your testimony when we were training docents for this exhibition, it was incredible. I mean, the one of the goals of this exhibition was to talk about those common conditions, and you all mentioned checkpoints. You all mentioned checkpoints and either the idea of identity either being stripped or having to carry an identity card or not having an identity card because that was stripped. So it was quite interesting. But Irma, you talked a lot about those checkpoints and the buses and the students. Can you talk about those moments?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how many checkpoints I passed during those years. I don't know, but I am from the highlands of Guatemala, in the mountains, and the majority of indigenous people live in this part of Guatemala. And when I went to Guatemala City for my university studies, I passed every trip probably between 7 to 10 checkpoints. The distance is 200 kilometers. It's not too much, but in those times, the roads were no good. So we never know when Army will stop us. And they ask for the papers, they ask many questions, and I learned from the indigenous communities that some rules in order to survive. When you are in the middle of the war, you need to be create immediately some forms of resistance. One of these was not to talk, avoid to say anything, try not to see nothing, try to avoid feel emotions. So those part of forms of resistance we use it in order to survive. Also, not to speaking our language. I never spoke in Kich'e. Never. I never used my huipil, my corte, my clothes. Never. So but now when I thinking about all these checkpoints, I remember also that my house was next to the police. So next to one of the most terrible police that Guatemala has, the Policía de Hacienda. And we were witness how these police detain people and how those people were tortured inside this building. So we hear almost every day. And I remember my father and my mother took us and embraced us and tried to talk about another things. But in other cases, my mother tried to support some of the women and the children with some coffee, with some tea. She talked with them in indigenous languages, in Kich'e, and my mommy tried to support them, but it was so hard. So the people was die next to us. The people was asking for help in the next house, in the next field. So it was not easy. So the checkpoints, to live next to the police, to try to live in a different way. All those things are very, very difficult because externally and internally, I feel like I am indigenous. But in those moments, I need to repress this part in order to survive, you know. Also, to other indigenous people confront the same experiences, but we don't talk also. The silence was part of the strategic to survive. And now, as an old woman, I work with many other survivors, women and men, and the history, the stories are different. But behind the old history, there is a structural racism. Why we go? I asked many times why we confront all this violence, all this hate against us, because we try to express our culture or to speak our languages or to live like indigenous. In the middle of this, now I recognize that my country is a very racist country. The elite built a very racist state, and for this state, the indigenous people never have a value. We only saw us as a servants. So this is part of the structural problem that Guatemala is still confronting.
Kizito, for you, in the exhibition, you talk about the moment that the president's plane, the president of Rwanda's plane, was shot down. That really was that spark to the genocide. But it had an immediate and direct impact on your family. Can you talk about that moment and then the days after?
Yeah, so when the president airplane was shot, it was shot I think by 8:30. The whole genocide has started. You can imagine that this is something that has been prepared or planned for many years. So I remember I heard on the radio about the president's death, and I ran into my mom's bedroom and I said, "Mom, guess what? The evil president, because we didn't like him, he was oppressor." And to me, as a teenager, I thought, him being killed, my government curfew is gone. So that was the first. I was like, okay, I can deal with my mom's curfew right now. I don't have to deal with the president government. I mean, the government curfew. So, but my mom got up because she knew exactly what was going to happen. And I remember she got up, eyes got big, and she said, "Son, do not get too excited because anytime a leader of this country dies, we, meaning the Tutsis, we pay a heavy price." So as a teenager, I didn't know what she was talking about. So a couple of days later, my house was attacked, blown up, and we ran away. And so it just a couple of days later, the whole conflict turned into genocide, and that's when I started running away. My house was destroyed, and I started living in the jungle and swamps. And later on, got hacked with machete. Left to die in these dead bodies, and my mom was taken away and killed down to mass grave, and my entire family almost gone. By the time I remember, I turned 15 in the swamps, hiding, and I remember thinking that I'm the only person left in this world because I was fatherless, motherless, and later on I was rescued and started living in an orphanage, group home, street institution, and the basketball saved me. So I grew up super tall, and somebody said, you know what, I can take you to America to play basketball. So I ended up here in Chicago. So that's it. That's my story. Yeah. So, but it's a
I'm
horrible.
not going to play one-on-one.
Oh yeah, I can. Yeah, I can't run, but I can shoot. I told my kids tennis, but I can shoot right now. So, but it is. When I look back, I say, it is terrible. I try to make lighter, because I have kids, and I have to talk to my daughter. My daughter is so Americanized. I mean, she's American. She was born here. She wants to sue somebody who almost come ahead of. This guy, he's a poor guy in prison. He doesn't have nothing. I say, Keza, if we sue him, what you gonna get? A goat? He was like, no, he needs to. I'm like, you know what? She's 10 years old, and she's learning about how pretty much you take people to court. But it is tough. It is hard for survivors. It is hard for all of us. When I hear my sister here talking, it just brings back the memories. And it brings back the memories, and it's the life we have every single day. Every day we face the challenges, and it always takes you back to the genocide. When I talk about mental health, PTSD, for me, any smells brings back the dead bodies I was dumped in. And about in a hotel, when I leave the water running, I feel like I'm in the swamps. Somebody's coming to get me. It's just like it's constant reminder what I went through. So as I said, I was hacked with the machete here. I left to die in these dead bodies. I have a dent here. I always tell people, if I lose my hair, I'm gonna get what you call it, the little pin. Here you go, brother. I'm going for it. I'm not because so when it's cold, I used to go to school. I went to high school here in Chicago, and how it gets cold here. So I didn't know why when it's cold, my head, my my head feel like about to crack, feel like ice cracking. So because it's where there's a dent is, in the summertime it will thrive. It will just pound all the time, and I will get migraine headaches, and I didn't know what it was until I went through therapy. So I had to. Luckily, I was living with the wonderful people here in Chicago. Miss Pam, I think she was supposed to come here, but I don't know if she's here. But she's the one. She's an American woman. She took me in when I came here as a refugee, and she realized something was off. I was angry. I was upset. I remember my coach told me, like, man, you're aggressive, but you're too aggressive. I like that you're aggressive, but you're too aggressive. You're going to kill somebody, you're going to get killed. Because I'll go up with the rebound. I came back, hit somebody. Because I realized if I fight playing basketball, I can't go to jail. So, but I always want to hear. So, because I always have the anger and the bitterness, and I don't know why, but it was because of what I went through. So, but this Miss Pam and her husband Pete took me to. It's called a Kovla. I don't know if it's still called a Kovla.
Oh, yeah, the Kofler Center.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah. So I met a lot of people from Eastern Europe at that time. That was 1997, 98, and they realized that of course, that's where I learned the term PTSD. That's where I learned about the triggers. So what I learned through therapy is just like I know my triggers. I know I was told that which is true. My mental health will never be cured, but it can be manageable. And that's what I do. I've been managing those so far. I haven't been to jail. I haven't punched anybody. So, because I can control those things. So, and I'm hoping, I'm praying that all of us who go through all this can just learn from what happened to us. Because it's not, for the second generation, third generation, I can tell I have transferred my trauma to my kids. This breaks my heart, man. It crushes me to see my little 10-year-old daughter just kind of paranoid. Anytime we go to, because I'm very paranoid about the safety. Like when I came here, the first thing I saw here was the exit. Because if some pop up, I'm out. so that's what, and my daughter has the same thing. Anytime we go to bed, I saw her checking her windows and closing her. I was like, what are you doing? So like, you do it too. I was like, man, this is not right. But that's a part of our lives, and we're trying to learn and talk, and hopefully, because the thing is, the good thing about the exhibition like this one or the museum like this one, it's just telling people that these things does happen. Because the more you pile up and don't talk about it, guess what? You become a perpetrator. Because for me, I was angry, I was upset. My goal was to commit another genocide in Rwanda. I was about to take out somebody who killed my mom, who killed almost cut my head off, who abused my sister. My older sister was held hostage and gang raped, had a miscarriage in the captivity. She was 17. Now she's paralyzed. She's bedridden in a single home. She's 47 years old. She's 2 years older than me. And 3 years ago, I was going to Rwanda. I called her to come to pick me up I was in Doha, Qatar. I said, can you come pick me up from the airport? She was kind of stammering. She was like shaking. She said, my back is hurting. And I said, what's going on? She said, I think I have malaria. That's what we have in Africa. And when I got there, it was during COVID. You had to go through the hotel waiting for, to be cleared. And when I was at the hotel in Rwanda, one of my nieces called me and said, Auntie Monique is in the hospital. I was like, what happened? She said she had a stroke. I was like, are you sure? Like, yeah. So the next day, I could not go to the hospital. Her husband brought her back to the hotel where I was, and her mouth was loose. And from those 2021, and now everything got so bad because of the trauma and whatever she went through. And now she's being fed in the tube. She can't talk. And that, to me, if there's anything that breaks my heart, is to see my sister. She's my best friend. She was my best friend. Going through all she went through, and now she's gonna die slowly. So anytime somebody calls from Rwanda, I'm ready to go, because I know that it should be gone. So, and that's part of the genocide. That's a part of atrocities. That every person who went through what we went through, we have stories to tell. We have a struggle we go through, but we try to stay strong, because for some reason to be here, it's a miracle. It is a miracle. Honestly, to me, anytime I'm driving a highway, I'm like, wow, this is wonderful, because I can breathe, I can do whatever I need to do. So thank you so much, and I appreciate. I can talk I do talk for a living, by the way. So I can talk 7 hours nonstop. So
Nodding their heads in affirmation of some of the things that you have to say. Amina, with the restrictions that were happening in Burma, you were ultimately able to escape. Can you talk about that decision to escape, to leave, and the process of going through that?
တလောက်တော့ဒုက္ခပေးခဲ့တာတော့အမေဘယ်လိုဗမာပြည်ကနေထွက်သွားလဲမလေးရှားကိုဘယ်လိုလာလဲ
တော်လူတွေကိုလိုက်ခုံနေတဲ့အချိန်မှာမင်းကလေးတွေကိုခေါ်ဖြတ်စီနေတဲ့အချိန်မှာပြေးရင်လွှိုင်းနဲ့အမေတို့ကနောက်တစ်နေရာကိုရောက်သွားတယ်။အဲဒီကနေပြီးတော့အဲ့လိုပဲပေါ့တဖြည်းဖြည်းနဲ့တောရနဲ့တက်ဖန်းကတစ်ခေါက်ထိသွားတယ်။မဆောက်မှလာပြီးတော့မဆောက်မှအဲ့ဒီဖန်းကရိုက်ခန့်ထိတဲ့ကိစ္စတွေအမျိုးသမီးတွေမရင်းချင်းတဲ့ကိစ္စတွေပြောတော့အဲ့ဒီကတနာတော့ငါတို့ပြန်လွတ်ပေးလိုက်တော့ငါတို့ထိုင်ဝင်တက်လာလိုက်တယ်
So when they were looking for women like teenage girl women to like the militaries they wanted to rape them so all the women ran away and they went through some jungles and trees like broken down through some gates and stuff like that they went through Thailand and they're all like the police stopped them they was like where are you guys going and they explained the stories to the police of the Thailand and they was like oh we get it and they let them go and that's how like she escaped slowly from Thailand to Malaysia
And then how, Amina, were you able to then come to the U.S.?
Malaysia ကနေ America ဘယ်လိုရောက်လာလဲ
UN ကနေပြီးတော့ရှောက်တာပဲတို့ဒီလာဖို့အတွက်
So in Malaysia we have a UNHCR is a branch for United Nations and they help bring refugees through their branch to Chicago to anywhere in United States or Canada.
Well, so I have literally a binder full of questions, but it's getting late. So what I wanna do is ask you both or all of you the same question. And Amina, I wanna start with you. In one of the final videos in the exhibition, you literally plead with our visitors to understand that this genocide is still happening and that we have to do something. We have to recognize that it happens. what are you ultimately hoping, if we can take away one thing from your story, or a visitor to this exhibition, what is the one thing you're hoping a visitor hearing your story might take away?
ဒီမှာသူတို့ចောင်းသားတွေလာမယ်လူကြီးတွေလာမယ်တခုသူတို့ဗာတင်ပြတယ်ဗာယူဝခိုင်းတယ်သူတို့ဗာတင်ယူခိုင်းတယ်အဲ့ဒီဗီဒီယိုတွေက အမေကအခုကျတောင်းနေတယ်ငါတို့နိုင်ငံမှာနိုင်ငံတကာမှာဒီလိုမျိုးဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့နော်အကုန်လုံးနိုင်ငံတွေကအေဂျင့်မှုရပါတယ်ငါတို့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာဘာလို့အေဂျင့်မှုမရနိုင်တာလဲအဲ့ဒီအတွက်အမေကဒီမှာလာပြီးတော့လည်းတော်တော်စဉ်းစားတယ်နိုင်ငံရုပ်ပြန်ကောင်းစေချင်တယ်ပေါ့နော်လူတွေအခုဒုက္ခရောက်နေလူတွေကိုအကူအညီပေးစေချင်တယ်အဲ့ဒီအကူအညီအများလိုအပ်တယ် And one thing that she hoped that people learn from the exhibition is how hard it was for immigrations and people to face genocide and going through it. And like we have people nowadays like who think everything is easy to get and everything is just there for you. But like back in the days, it wasn't. That's what she want people to learn about it. It's like all the immigrations and all the peoples who have faced genocides, they went through some kind of hardship and that's how they end up here. And and one more thing she would like to request is just if you guys could help talk about it more, like be there for them, and if like volunteer a lot in those kind of stuff. That would be like that.
Thank you.
Amina di Manila sana Kiro yeah and he was so good and she said that it's hard like she's so sorry crying but it's hard that she need to let this go you know and it's still the same but it's she deal with it but she's so sorry. And she hoped that whoever's like you guys went through this, she's so sorry for that, and she could relate to it too. Everything later.
Oh man,
Yeah.
Thank you.
oh man, I don't want to class.
Oh.
So, Kizito, you talk about someone that we know well at this museum, Eva Kor, and your relationship with Eva Kor, and that process of forgiveness and reconciliation, and the incredible work that your center is doing now, and the work that you're doing in Indianapolis. Who just got Caitlin Clark looking forward to go to the first game. Can you talk a little bit about the work of your center, your relationship with Eva, and what is your one lesson you're hoping people hear from your story?
Thank you so much. I'm so emotional because this just brings back. This is my sisters, regardless where they come from. Because when they cry, this reminds me my sisters who went through terrible things. So, Eva Cole became, I say, my savior because I was looking for the solution. I went to school, criminal justice, to become a lawyer, a judge, a police officer, and to go back and become the president or the CEO of the prison in Rwanda and burn the prison in Rwanda. That was the goal. That was my 22-year, in college because I was angry and upset and I wanted to revenge so bad. But the more I think about revenge, the more I get sick physically. I would get migraine headaches. I would just, have nightmares. But because to me, I felt like there was no justice enough for a survivor. As I said, I worked in court. I was working in court, and I remember one time the judge sentencing a perpetrator to a rehabilitation, and turn around to talk to the victims like, "I'm sorry what happened to you. Take care of yourself." And I'm like, okay, who needs the help here? A criminal or a victim? So that thing tricked me to the point where I said I need to find a justice for myself. And of course, I went through the legal system, whatever it was, but everything would take forever. In Rwanda, the genocides has been, I think that the United Nations has spent like billions of dollars, even it's not 2 or 3, but they have completed like less than 100, not even 20 cases, if I remember well. So to me, when I made Eva call, I was looking for a solution I was looking for my own justice. And I remember just Googling, everybody who went through the worst thing I went through, everything I went through, and I realized all of them have something in common, forgiveness. And I was like, man, I ain't gonna forgive nobody. Hey, why? But the more I learned about it, the more I realized it was for me. And luckily, I was living in Indiana, and Eva Cole was like an hour, 2 hours away from me. And I remember setting up an email. Somebody called Kill Majeski. You probably know him. So Kill was a young man working for her, and I went to see Eva Cole to ask about forgiveness. The first thing she did, she's like, sit down. She put a chair by her. She said, go ahead, tell your story. I said, I came here to talk to you, not to tell people a story. It was a Saturday, and she used to have a lot of groups, lectures, and I started telling my story. And I remember telling people that you see similar. I think I don't know how she put it, but it was like we have the similar story or the similar struggle from different countries, different race, different. I mean, she was a 5'4" or 5'9", and I'm like, so it was it was different. So, but we have something in common, and she became a force behind what I'm doing. She asked me one time, we went to speak somewhere, and somebody asked me my business card, and I didn't have it. If you know Eva, you boy, she went off for me. I was like, okay, I came up visit. She was like, I cannot. I was like, okay. So from that time, I realized she was serious and she wanted me to be better. She saw something I never seen in myself. Because for me, I was just a young man trying to figure out things. But once she realized I was willing to share my story and to help people, she kind of took me under her wings, and she helped me to open up my organization. She sent a Kill to show me how the nonprofit organization worked. And it took off. That was 2015, 14, 15, and now we are all over the world. We are in here, Africa, of course. We have helped a lot of people through our programs, reconciliation and forgiveness. We teach about, how you can move from anger and bitterness and become somebody productive. I use my story, and I mean, it's something incredible. People will ask me how I ended up here. I was like, I don't know. I go everywhere and I meet people, and some people invite me. I was like, I think I met Kelley somewhere where I was talking. So I don't know. I mean, as I said, I just go everywhere and speak, and I ended up somewhere else. But it's because Eva Cole have taught me or showed me that I need to let it go. She said, the sooner the better. And from that time, all my anger, my bitterness went, my migraine headaches. I still have a nightmare. I dream about genocide most of the time, but overall, I can manage my craziness. So I'm good now. So thank you so much. Yeah.
You have done just incredible work in Guatemala, not only serving as expert witness in a number of trials, but just the work that you're doing on the ground today in Guatemala. But when we were going through the media and the different films, I mean, you talked so much about the process of healing and how difficult it can be to heal, but why it is so important that you continue to share your story and the story of the indigenous community. So what for you is that one lesson, that one thing you're hoping that people not only maybe take from your story, but the story of those who were murdered during the genocide?
Okay. The indigenous people in Guatemala as a pueblos, as a person, were recognized until 1995. So almost 30 years ago. So we were recognized. So inside us is many traumas. The trauma is with us. So for me, it was not easy to grow up, to went to university, to work as a young journalist. At the same, I was not easy because around me where is a lot of racism, a lot of hate, but for some reason we survive. I believe in this for some reason. Today is an example. We are here together, and part of my work in Guatemala, I'm living in Guatemala, I'm working with indigenous communities. I working for my people because we have now some rights, but no full rights. So we still working for this. And when I work with another survivors, especially women, I heard very terrible stories. So I remember I only shared one of these. I remember a woman, Kich'e woman, who survived in the mountains. She lived her community because the army attacked her community, and all the men were killed, and the women were confront sexual violence. So she left her community with 4 children, and she went to the mountains. And in the mountains, she lost all her children for because in the mountains were no water, the children were sick. So one by one, they died. 4 years later, when she returned to the community, when the army left the area, she was alone, and her corte and bill was in very bad condition. She was alone, and when I work with her, I say, in her mind, she thought that if she leave her community, she will save the children. But it was not this. So I work with her. I try to prepare a report for the trials, a report for judges. I write in the newspaper. I publish articles, but also, like you, in many moments of my life inside, I felt a lot of, it's a mix of feelings. I hate sometimes the government, sometimes the elites who control the country, but during many years, I tried to find another way to work with them, but also to healing myself. And one way for me is to write poetry. So also I write poetry, and I try to publish, and I try to work with youth people and also with non-indigenous people. Because in my experience, when we know the other, we believe that the other is dangerous. When we know to know the other culture, the other languages, the other colors, when we never try to try other foods, we think that those experiences could be bad for us. So I love to write poetry, and for me it's part of my healing. I publish it. Also, I try to support in different ways, but I always in the last year I have been felt very blessed, and I try to use the rest of my life to working with indigenous communities. I remember my mom when I was a child. She always said me this: indigenous women are beautiful. Indigenous women are very valued because we work hard, we are intelligent, we have many things inside, and we can do whatever we wanted. So those words I keep inside. And those words help me to survive. When the people in the school told me that we are ugly and or we are responsible of all the social problems in Guatemala. So please, I would like to read a poem, and this is in Spanish, so I can send you later and probably someone want to translate. I wrote this poem after to work with a group of indigenous women who survive sexual violence. And they told me about all their own stories. And one of them, when we finish all the stories, she asked me something. You know, compañera, I'm missing my son. And do you think that my son is still alive? Her son was disappeared. And he asked me, do you think he is alive? He's still alive? Because I'm still waiting for him. I'm here for him. I am alive for him. So I wrote this poem for all the indigenous mothers who are waiting for their children. The name of the poem is Y si te encuentro, amor. Y si te encuentro, amor, ¿cómo te miraré? ¿Acaso me mirarás? ¿Cómo nos veremos? ¿Me recordarás aún? ¿Me encontrarás entre estas llanuras después de 33 largas primaveras? Después de 32 angustiosos inviernos. ¿Qué haremos, amor, con nuestras manos? ¿Acaso resucitaremos los sueños robados por la ilegitimidad? ¿Cómo tomaremos todo aquello que nos fue arrebatado? ¿Qué haré con mis palabras? ¿Cómo te las hilvanaré? ¿Cómo pararé este torrente desde el habla? ¿Cómo te responderé? ¿Cómo me hablarás tú? ¿Cómo me narrarás tu ausencia? Encontrarás en los tejidos de mi cuerpo mi color. Reconocerás mi aroma al penetrar en mi sueño. Podrá el tiempo mostrarte que nunca te fuiste, que tu ausencia se tornó en paisaje que solo aguardan tu presencia. Aún desenvolverás de mí el amor que te di, el amor que cobijé entre estas flores de un madre cacao, que escondí entre mecapales y entre redes. ¿Qué harán nuestras manos? ¿Qué dirán nuestros labios? Tantos tiempo en espera que ya se han secado. Y si te encuentro, amor, parará de rodar el agua, cesará la espera, acabará esta pena. Llegará la madrugada, me abrazarás como un colibrí. ¿Qué haré, amor? Dime, ¿qué haré si te encuentro? Muchas gracias.
For you, next year we are at the point of 110 years since the Armenian genocide, but yet it took until 2021 for the first time a U.S. sitting president acknowledged
Right.
the Armenian genocide. 2021.
Yep.
For you, and I know your family's here, what is it that you are hoping that people learn about this genocide that seems so long ago, but in so many ways is still ever present in the news, is still facing denial. I mean, there's a huge
Right.
legacy as a descendant. What is your hope?
Well, I guess Armenia is still facing, I mean, what's left of the Armenian population in Anatolia is a small little state that's up in the Caucasus. It's just, you can go from one end to the other in a couple hours, right, Oscar? Something like that. It's facing an existential crisis. There are threats that still that of these people being wiped out by their neighbors who have maintained a hostile relationship with them, and it's almost like there is a continuation of the genocide that still is taking place. Turkey, who is the perpetrator of the genocide of the Armenians, the Assyrians, and other Christians within the Anatolia, has denied. It's been described as an industrial scale denial of the Armenian genocide. Traces of buildings that were Armenian, monuments or churches throughout Armenia, throughout Turkey, are misattributed to say that they're not Armenian. They're allowed to be decay and to turn to dust. It's deeply troubling that this is going on. There's a cultural genocide that's taking place. The memory of these people who occupied these lands for 3,000 years is still being destroyed. So there's an active aspect of this genocide still today. I visited Turkey, in 2015, and went to the church that my grandfather had helped build, and it was a magnificent church in this small village, and it's a garage, and it's in the process of decay. And even with the intervention of other outside funding for it, it's not allowed to go ahead and be restored. There's an intentionality of having the culture disappear from these lands. Armenians, and I don't know how many people know about this, but we watched a second genocide, what we term a second genocide, occur last year, and it's gotten so little press. It's really disturbing that, the New York Times ran two stories during this whole escapade in Nagorno-Karabakh. There's an enclave of Armenians that had vied for independence, who were attacked by an Azeri army that was armed primarily by Turkey, and with the Turkish advisors helping them out, with them shuttling jihadists from Syria to aid in the war against this enclave. And then the enclave, beginning in September 22, or December of 22, they were blockaded, and no food, no medicine was allowed to go into this area for a period of 9 months. And then on the threat of death, these people were all forcibly removed. 120,000 Armenians. This is just last September 2023 that this occurred, and not anything happened. The United States sent in Samantha Powers after the fact to welcome the refugees that were streaming into Armenia. It's tragic that this is happening in 2023 without any kind of international intervention. And I listen to these stories. It's really tragic that there's not more of a respect given to international agencies, to the UN, to act in to protect people that cannot be protected. Armenia is isolated. It has no true allies right now. Russia has hung them out to dry, and it's troubling. It's a troubling situation for Armenians everywhere because it is an existential crisis at the moment. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I had to get that out there.
I appreciate that. Well, I want the five of you. You have an incredible son. You need to be very proud of your son. Thank you. I want to thank the four of you so much for the gift of sharing your stories, bearing your souls, and that you are just absolute inspirations. Cannot thank you enough. It is an honor and privilege to be able to share your remarkable stories at our new exhibition. And thank you, everybody, for your patience. And for those that are interested, Kizito's books are available for sale in the Legacy Shop, and he'll stick around and sign any that are interested. Drive safe, and thank you again for coming.
Mm-hmm.